I mean, it gets your attention, doesn't it? If nothing else, when that happens. Morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I see we've gone for a cave-like atmosphere with the blinds, which is nice. Happy Christmas as well. So it says here, welcome, introductions and purpose. I'm supposed to give a verbal update. I'm not sure I'm going to give much of a verbal update on purpose because I think we all know now why we are here, but it is brilliant that everybody's joined. Thank you. And I feel like we're building up some momentum and a head of steam with this work. So yeah, it's great that you're all doing this work with us. So item number 2, we move on to declarations of interest to be shared. Has anybody got any sudden shareholdings in pharmaceutical companies that they want to declare? No? Okay, me neither. Perfect. In which case we move on to item number 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Can I just check? You're looking at me down that end of the table like I've missed something. No, okay. Okay, slightly nervous. Okay, item number 3, I take it attendees, no quibbles. Okay. In terms of the minutes themselves, did anybody spot any glaring errors? No. Okay, in which case we shall accept the minutes as a true record. Thank you very much. Item number 4, questions from the public.
Well, Marianna's going to give an initial response, but of course we'll follow it up afterwards. But
Shall I read that question? So the question is, I would be very interested to know if there are any plans to recognise dementia as a specific priority area for the ICP, and whether there are any plans for a dementia-specific steering group for the ICP. That's the question that came in with us quite late yesterday. So in terms of an initial response, we'd really like to recognise that we know that there are people and their families in South Yorkshire that are affected by dementia and that it can be incredibly challenging. We also know from our South Yorkshire population health needs assessments, the piece of work that we did to inform our strategy, that actually the dementia diagnosis rates in South Yorkshire are really similar to England and in some cases better. And we know from that piece of work as well that the percentage of adults kind of over 65 that have dementia that with a formally recorded diagnosis, that we actually generally fare better than England. And so it's upon that that we can build, and that each of our places and our mental health provider collaborative, they have ongoing work that includes a focus on dementia. So our existing forums, mechanisms, and what we will do is build on those to continue the work that's already taking place across all of our places, and that as an integrated care partnership will support that approach.
Thank you very much. And at the risk of bringing personal experience into the meeting, my uncle, who was in the late stages of dementia, died 2 weeks ago. So I genuinely appreciate the comments that you just made and the significance of the issue. Okay, in which case, sorry, please do
something to it.
Please.
So David Crichton, Chief Medical Officer. As alongside Marianna's reply, I think it's important to acknowledge that the Health and Care Secretary did announce a 10-year dementia plan in May of this year. So obviously that's something that we'll be taking through the NHS. And also within the strategy today, I don't think we should view it separately. So the lifestyle measures that we're focusing on will improve, people and prevent dementia, but also, certainly vascular. We hope that there'll be less people who are affected by it. So although if the question was specifically on dementia, some of the broader priorities that we have will impact and be helpful as well. Thank you.
Before I move on, any other comments? No, thank you, Dave. In which case, item number 5, please. It will.
Thank you.
Lots of people want to do
it. Thank you. The slides have come up magically. Just in terms of how we're going to do this. So we did a tremendous amount of work getting to a place where we've got an engagement draft of our strategy. That's in your packs with a couple of papers. So the way that we'd like to try and bring that alive this morning is through a number of people taking the opportunities to share a bit of that. So there'll be a number of colleagues, so just bear with it, just so that we can do that. So there'll be a number of colleagues that will, I guess, bring to life the sort of the various elements. And I think it's just really helpful to say at this outset. So when you think about when we came together back in September, which is not that long ago, really, the amount of engagement that we've had in putting together our initial integrated care strategy has been quite momentous. So I think it's fair to say that it's really important that, you know, we make sure that we hear a number of voices in sort of bringing to life the strategy. We've got some slides that we're going to go through. Hopefully they won't sort of interrupt too much folks that are sort of dialing in to this meeting. But I just think it's just really helpful if we do that, because actually it brings out some of the key elements, and particularly thinking about the bold ambitions that are proposed in the strategy, and just sort of trying to think about where we've tried to make sure that we've been quite specific. If someone could move the slides on, please, to slide 3. And the reason why I just wanted to start there is just to remind us of how short that timeline has been from when we met in September to where we are now, which is 5 days away from December the 25th, isn't it? So actually we're on the 20th of December. I can't believe we've got here so quickly. But actually we've, in that time, and that's been a very tight time scale. And I think one of the things we all reflected on is that very tight time scale, particularly in enabling us to do some really good engagement work. So I think one of the things that we will go through today, and it's in the packs as well, is really being able to understand the level of engagement that we've done, who we've engaged with, and how we've tried to capture that within the strategy. And Andy will take us through that a little bit later on. But I think it's really important that we reflect on that, because we did know that it was a huge, you know, hugely tight timescale that had been set for us by DHSC in asking us to set out our strategy. But I think there's something that's sort of quite, I guess, quite at the forefront of my mind. So one of the things that we said when we came together in September was how important it was for us to set out our initial integrated care strategy to reinforce the importance of the focus on population health, and us coming together to be able to really do something about the health needs of our population and some of those outcomes that we see in South Yorkshire that we've Mariana alluded to in relation to dementia, and both Rupert and Greg, supported by colleagues, have actually shared in the report that we did to inform the strategy. So we recognise that the here and now will always be hugely demanding on us, but actually being able to think about the medium and long term, and that's what this strategy is about, so that we can think about how we tackle some of the bigger issues in relation to health inequalities and those really important determinants of health are really in the forefront of my mind, particularly as we approach the sort of middle of the winter period and the pressures that we're seeing across health and social care and other in our system. So I just wanted to start there. I also wanted just to, I guess, jump forward a little bit, because one of the things we will be doing, and I say we as an NHS working with other partners, is set out our joint forward plan. And therefore there's a huge connection between this strategy and influencing that plan of the NHS. And one of the things that the ICP will want to do is to ensure that there is full recognition of this strategy reflected in what essentially is a delivery plan for the NHS. So I just wanted to connect those two things, because that is something that will follow over the next 3 months in terms of working through and setting out that plan. Could I move on to the next slide, please? And this is just a brief reminder of what we were asked to do. So we did have guidance, remember, back in the late summer, early September, setting out what was expected of us in setting out our strategy. Those are on the left-hand side. And there are no surprises in that. But I think one of the things that I think it's helpful to pull out is of setting out some shared outcomes. And you'll see that when we go on to, you'll have seen in the draft strategy, but when we go on to trying to pull out some of the key elements of that, we'll be reminded of those shared outcomes that we agreed were important for South Yorkshire there. On the other side of that diagram or that slide is some of the key principles by which we've gone about setting out our strategy. And we've had this is our fourth meeting, second meeting in public. And at that first meeting, one of the things that we did was reflect on where we are. So in part, that was reflecting on where we were in terms of our population health and population health outcomes, and how far we've been able to work as a system to make some inroads, particularly around the health inequalities. And there were some quite challenging discussions about where we'd been able to really make some shifts. And therefore that framed really how we go about developing this strategy. But there was a recognition that we weren't starting from scratch and that we had strategies and plans in place, both for South Yorkshire in terms of the long-term plan that we set out some years ago, but also in each of our places, including our health and wellbeing board strategies. And some of those plans had some time to go to deliver on their ambitions. So it was a recognition that whatever we did here, it built upon that. But I think more importantly, it reflected some things that the Integrated Care Partnership felt it could achieve some effect on by working together. So in other words, it wasn't duplicating what folks were doing in places or organisations, or indeed the stuff that we were doing collectively across South Yorkshire. It actually added additional value to that. So I guess as we go through the plan that we've set out and some of the priorities, I think it would be good for us just to reflect on those and whether we still think that those priorities and those bold ambitions just do that, notwithstanding that some of the detail of the what will have to follow. The second thing was the insights that we'd gained from the public. So as I said, Andy will take us through that, but remember, we took the opportunity to reflect on what our public had told us over the previous years, and that really started to shape the initial drafts of that. But again, we need to be very cognizant of that, and we've tried to reflect that in the iteration of the strategy as we've gone along. So I think there'd be a good test for us to make sure that we've done that well. And then there's the journey that South Yorkshire's been on. So we've been working as an integrated care system for a number of years, and therefore we've got some experience of working in partnership. So we were building on that. So just a recognition that we've got some form, I guess, for coming together. And then finally, there's the work that the Integrated Care Partnership has been doing itself since it formed in September. So I guess those four things really, in essence, are what's shaped the approach. Could we just move on one slide? Thanks. I've already covered really what's on this slide, because I think this just literally reflects the three key meetings that we've had over the course of September, October and November. But I think the thing that I wanted to add to this is just to remind folks of the sort of the working group, the doing group that was established as part of helping us really get some traction on and getting some work done, so that we could have something to share and have something that could be informed and shaped further by all of our stakeholders. And indeed, when we've been talking to our public and where we've been trying to engage with key groups, we've had something to really reflect and build on. And therefore, I wanted just to thank that working group, because they did do an awful amount of work behind the scenes to try and bring together what you've had in terms of our engagement draft of the strategy. I think the final thing I wanted to say as part of the introductory bit was something that was seen as really important, which is, I keep saying the initial integrated care strategy, and I think that's quite important, because I think given the short timescale that we had to do this, there's a recognition that further work will inform our strategy, and indeed the detail that comes from this, to develop some real action and plans. And therefore, just a recognition that the draft that you got is an engagement draft. There is further opportunity to shape it. Our health and wellbeing board leads were quite keen to clarify that in their meeting. Is it last week, Councillor Roach? Last week, my weeks are going very quickly. Because I think we really wanted to make sure there was time for the draft to go into our health and wellbeing boards so that it can be fully considered. So I think that does elongate our time to get in a final draft of the strategy, if we want to use that word, and therefore that'll be reflected in the next steps. But I just thought it was important just to reflect that. So there's still lots of opportunity. The draft strategy was discussed at our system leadership executive. So that's where all of our system partners come together at a leadership level. That's across health and social care. And the key tenets of the strategy and the full draft, of course, is shared very widely. So we're just imploring any of our partners to take the opportunity to reflect on the draft as it is, and share their thoughts or feedback. And I think that also helps us with making sure that we've really captured the insights that we've gained from the What Matters to You campaign that ran over November into December, but also the discussions today and reflections on the draft as well. So we've got a bit of time to be able to do that into the new year. So I think that was my intro. We're going to go through now hearing from a few folks who are going to try and help us really pull out the key elements. It's going to start with Andy, I think, who's going to share with us our approach to engagement, and where we've heard from our public and some of our stakeholder groups as well. So can I hand over to you, Andy?
Yeah, thank you, Will. I should probably place on record my thanks to Katie Davison, our head of communications and engagement, who wanted to be here today, and she pulled together the majority of this work. So I think a real credit to the work that she's done. Next slide, please. So, the next slide, please. So we approach this in two phases, really. The first phase looked at all of the information that we'd gathered over the last couple of years about the insights that our communities had told us, and I think there were 284 individual pieces of insight into that. So so a huge piece of desktop work to cover that. So that you don't have to listen to myself talk for long periods of time, we've got a couple of animations. So if we move on to the next slide, please, that should take us into the first one. So next slide, please. So as the animation showed, the three main things that came out of it were really awareness, access, and agency. So that kind of informed the second phase of the approach, which was we wanted to try and include as many people in our engagement as possible. So that led us to asking the question of what matters to you about your health and well-being. So something really broad that everybody from across South Yorkshire could engage in. So next slide, please. So that kind of brought us onto the phase 2 approach. So we launched a digital survey that we promoted widely across all channels and across all partners. So we asked as many health and care staff to take part in that as well. And in the end, I think we had 465 responses to that survey, which was good in the time available to us. And then we also asked partner organisations to support us as well. So I'd like to place on record our thanks to our Health Watch colleagues for being able to do so. And then we also linked in with a variety of community groups across South Yorkshire. So if you can just put the next slide up, please. So we had a really broad range of groups that were willing to come together, either have a bespoke meeting or to take over one of their existing meetings to really discuss this. So again, I'd like to place on record all those groups that did so. So I think in the end, we're saying that more than 500 people took part, but I think in reality, it's far higher than that, given the amount of people that would have taken part in those discussions. And as you can see, there's a really broad range of our communities. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So we can see just how widely that group of people took in. So all 4 of our places, Barnsley, Doncaster, Rotherham and Sheffield, were really represented in there. And we had people from on the edges of our borders to take part as well, because as we know that those people use NHS and care services as well in South Yorkshire. As with many of these kind of exercises, the majority of people we did hear were from female. But we did get a really good representative group of people from across South Yorkshire. So, and as you can see on the slide, and then we heard from military veterans as well. So that was an important voice to get in there. Next slide, please. And then it was really important to make sure that we heard from our diverse communities as well. So at the time that these slides were put together, I think because the timescales were so tight, we were just putting together what the proportions were of our communities, but approximately 85% of those were white British, and then the other 15% made up a wide range of groups across South Yorkshire, our Pakistani community, our South Asian community, and many other communities in there as well. And indeed, quite a number of people representing different religions as well took part. So what we will be doing is we will be updating the engagement report now that we've got that additional information as we've crunched through all those responses. Next slide, please. And then we heard from a really wide range of age groups as well. So that was a really positive thing, because obviously with a majority of surveys, you do hear from one demographic more than others. And again, credit to my colleague Katie, who spent time in local schools, chatting to school children about what mattered to their health and well-being as well, so that we did hear from some younger voices as part of the survey. Next slide, please. And again, a really good range of those people within our communities who either use one of our services or stated that they themselves had a disability, and therefore the disabilities that were listed as the majority of the ones. Next slide, please. And I think, as Will touched upon, with the timescales involved, there were limitations to what we could achieve within 4 to 5 weeks. And so I think it goes back to the point Will made about the team that delivered this piece of work, did a really, really strong piece of work around getting so many people to respond in 4 or 5 weeks, at a time when some of the groups we approached who did want to take part but didn't have any meetings during that timescale, or had decided to do something bespoke for Christmas. So really grateful to all those who took part, and all those who would have wanted to take part if they'd have been able to. And then the next slide, please, which should be a second animation. Great. So next slide, please. So we're testing the IT person there by putting a YouTube video into the PowerPoint presentation. But hey, so person behind the glass screen, thank you for that. So I think that really summarised well kind of the 80-page report behind the engagement in those 3 minutes of animation, just what our communities told us and what was really important to them. And I think you can see from the key themes of access to care, quality of care, improving mental health and well-being, support to live well, wider determinants of health, and the affordability and the cost of living challenges really came through in that. So I think one of the things my colleague Katie wanted to stress was those 500 to 750 responses that we got to that. She feels that was a critical mass to making sure that the outcomes from that engagement exercise really do give a full picture for what our communities are telling us. So I think a really strong piece of work that she and the team were able to deliver on that. So I think we're not taking questions yet, so we'll pass over to Kathy.
Thank you, Oliver. We're going to go through some of the core elements of the strategy. So Kathy and Mariana are going to cover that off. Is that all right?
Yeah. Next slide. Next slide. So the first thing, obviously, in the strategy is what we're calling our working vision. Working means that it is open to a bit of flex and to change as well, but it's our working vision for now, and it's the best we could do in the time scale that we had. I think we spent quite a long time deliberating about this, people will remember, but I think if we unpick it a little bit, you know, it focuses on everyone. So it focuses on all of the people of South Yorkshire, all of the residents of South Yorkshire, but also on that principle of equity. We also discussed quite a lot about whether our diverse communities should be reflected in the vision, and had some email correspondence about what we meant by our diverse communities. And we proposed the following kind of definition, which is it talks about communities of different diversity dimensions, including race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation and identity, socioeconomic status, age, religion, physical and or mental neurological abilities, language, geographical location, urban, rural, towns, etc., veterans, and I suppose what we called other pertinent characteristics. So we've got a very rich definition of what, and understanding of what we mean by our diverse communities. And we want to make sure that everybody lives a happy, healthier life for longer, which speaks to extending their healthy life expectancy, but also speaks to that idea of happiness, and that people are in a positive mood and are contented with their existence and feel that they're living a meaningful and fulfilled life in a way, I suppose, is how I kind of understand happy. So I'm just going to, before we come to the plan on a page, I'm just going to come to Dolly and just see if there's anything Dolly wants to add to speak about the vision.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thanks so much, Kathy. Obviously, it's been a working vision that we've been working on since, and I'm happy with the outcome eventually. I just thought that, like you just read out, the word diverse means a lot of things to several people, and even some of our communities and some of our citizens as well. Looking at the region, Sheffield is different from Doncaster, so that's diverse enough. And as our citizens, we should be able to look and say, okay, this applies to me. And the word diverse, it's kind of personal to that person, and you want to see yourself in the vision. And if we're talking about empowering people and involving them, which is inclusivity, I must be able to look at the vision and say, okay, what does this mean to me? Am I seen in there because of my age or my sexual orientation or my religion, and being able to identify? And if I'm able to identify, then I'll be able to be involved. And then that's when we'll be able to be able to amplify people's voices by getting them involved. So I feel very satisfied with this, and I suppose everyone is as it is now. So, and I'm happy by the time it goes out, everyone will be able to identify with it and be able to support us to achieve the aim. Thank you.
And I think we also need to remind ourselves that the vision didn't come out of nowhere either, that it was shaped and crafted through a lot of synthesis of the visions that were in all our health and wellbeing plans as well. So next slide. This is our plan on a page, and it speaks to our key goals. I mean, the first key goal, obviously, everybody should live a healthier and a longer life, speaks to extending people's healthy life expectancy, which is one of the big ambitions I think we all share. The second one is around fairer outcomes for all, and I think that speaks to fairness and equitable, that everybody has a positive experience of their health and well-being, but that also the system itself is treating people fairly and equitably. And then the third aspect, which is our third goal, which is around access to quality health and well-being support and care, I think speaks very much to what we heard people talk about from their lived experience, the importance of not just of having quality information to manage their own health and well-being, but also having quality support and compassionate care when they need it at particular times in their lives as well. So those are our three big goals. And we spent quite a lot of time in our workshops mapping out what our shared outcomes were going to be. You know, what are the key changes that we wanted to make together. And, you know, the first is very much focused on children and young people who are identified in all of the health and wellbeing plans and in the previous strategy that we had, and making sure that every child and young person has the best possible start in life from a health perspective, but also from a learning and education perspective as well. Our second shared outcome is that everybody should live healthier and longer lives, but also that there is an improvement in people's well-being for those who have the most acute and the greatest need. Our third shared outcome speaks to social connectedness. You know, a lot of the research demonstrates that people who are socially connected, both to their places and their communities and to each other, have a much longer healthy life expectancy. So we want to make sure that our residents live in really safe, strong and vibrant communities that foster that sense of connectedness for people, that shapes and contributes to their health and well-being. And then our fourth shared outcome is that everybody has the skills and resources that they need to thrive. And I think that speaks again to, you know, awareness, that people have the knowledge, the skills, the access to care and the access to advice and guidance that they need to manage and support and look after their own health and well-being. Then we come to our bold ambitions. And our bold ambitions really link our key pillars that support the delivery of our shared outcomes. So our bold ambitions are, first of all, that really strong focus on early years development, making sure that every child in South Yorkshire goes to school ready, and good physical health, but also, you know, with good interpersonal intelligence, but also ready to learn and to enjoy the experience that school brings. Our second bold ambition is that together we will collaborate and behave differently so that we can accelerate the focus on early prevention. We can accelerate the focus on making sure that we're making sure that people's health and well-being is positive upstream in their lives, you know, before they become unwell. And we think that's really important. And also early identification is linked to that as well as one of our bold ambitions. The third ambition, I think, speaks to the different identity of the Integrated Care Partnership, which is that because we are working in partnership with South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, there are areas that we can influence that we might not have been able to influence to the same extent before. And that includes this pillar, this bold ambition, which is around working together to increase economic participation and to support an inclusive and a sustainable economy. So that speaks to increasing people's skills, but also developing and increasing people's livelihoods as well. You know, creating those high value jobs as well in South Yorkshire. And that's a key area, I think, where we can collaborate with the Mayoral Combined Authority on economic growth and inclusive economy and skills development. And then the last bold ambition is around collaborating and supporting our entire workforce, recognising that we have a really mixed workforce, you know, from the professional workforce, but also the voluntary community sector as well. And in some of our workshops, we talked about how important it was that the voluntary and community sector were seen as an equitable partner in all of our work, and that the workforce is really key in the voluntary community sector, but that also we need to show and demonstrate that we really value those unpaid members of the workforce as well, unpaid carers, and value their contribution to contributing to people's health and well-being. So really supporting that diverse workforce that reflects our communities is our fourth bold ambition. And we think that that has never quite been articulated in that way before. And then lastly, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we stood in this room and we kind of moved around the room to identify what were we going to commit to together. What were our big joint commitments? And those big joint commitments that we identified were, you know, that we would, you know, have bold, collaborative, but visible leadership that connected and related to the public of South Yorkshire. That we would identify, recognise and tackle systemic discrimination and anti-racism in the system, which is a big challenge, but, you know, we decided we were going to articulate it in that way. We committed to allocating and reallocating resources where there was greatest need, again, potentially looking to prevention, but also targeting those communities where health and well-being is poorest as well. And that speaks to left shift as well, as we've talked about before as a partnership. We all know that that's more difficult to do than it is to say, but that's a big joint commitment from all of us. We committed to joining up service delivery and support. And I think what we're really talking about there is hiding the wiring. You know, there might be lots of wiring that supports people's health and care and well-being, but actually to the customer, it's a seamless experience and they're getting the same quality of compassion, respect and care that throughout the system and across the system, no matter who they're engaging with. We talked about how important it was to have co-production and engagement with our people and our communities at the heart. And actually, you know, we've had some discussion about whether that's a joint commitment or whether that's a line up and down, like engagement on either side of the plan. And then lastly, we talked about how important it was that we all commit to that culture of innovation, working together and sharing learning, sharing best practice and sharing next practice. So those are our big joint collaborative commitments. So that takes us through the plan. Underneath, there are a number of enabling plans, which we also identified in the workshops, and Marianne is going to talk you through those.
We have the next slide, please. So in order to translate our strategy into delivery, we've identified a number of areas of enabling work or enabling plans. Some of these areas we've already got strategies that have been developed, and it's about alignment. So for example, our estate strategy, we're already looking at our South Yorkshire wide estate. We're already looking at how we make it modern, fit for purpose, sustainable and high quality. We have already got a number of areas of work underway with respect to developing workforce plans, and we're looking at making that next step where we work together to develop a workforce strategy for health and care across South Yorkshire. We're already building on lots of work in each of our places around integration, and we know that there's more that we can do. We know that access and quality are two key areas that really came through in terms of our themes from the insight work. And we know that there's more that we can do to improve access and to kind of address the variation that we've got in terms of, you know, understanding people's barriers and how we support people to overcome those, working with our communities and our voluntary sector. We've got ambitious plans around the digital agenda. Kathy's already spoken a little bit about our joint commitment to think about how we challenge ourselves to use our resources differently. So to rebalance those more towards preventative approaches and also those with greatest needs. So each of these kind of boxes on this slide, really underneath there is a whole development of enabling work or existing strategies and plans that we're looking at alignment to that will all support us in terms of translating our strategy into delivery. What we're going to do next is actually go through in a little bit more detail some of the way that we've put shape on our bold ambitions. And so we've got a number of speakers that are just going to take us through each of those. And I think that starts with you.
It does start with me. Thanks, Mariana. Thanks, Kath. That's brilliant. Can you just move on to the next slide, please? And the one after that. Brilliant. Thank you. So just so you know what you're seeing here, So Kathy went through our bold ambitions, but what we've tried to do is give some shape to those. So in other words, try to be a bit more specific about what we're going to do. And also what you're seeing on the right hand side is, so the engagement work that we've done that Andy talked about and the insights work and the responses that we got to the what matters to you. What we've tried to do is connect some of the what people told us with some of our bold ambitions. It really, what we're trying to show here is how the two have shaped and connect with one another. So this is our bold ambition for us to focus on the development in early years so that every child in South Yorkshire is school ready. So that's our bold ambition, and it's for those of you that really understand this, actually it's a massive ambition, a massive bold ambition for us. I also wanted just to connect, so we've talked about us as an ICP, but Oliver, you convened a wider group, didn't you, as part of the development? And actually, this was probably one of the least contentious of bold ambitions. So in other words, I think there was huge consensus around this being a really, really important priority and a really easy bold ambition for us to really get behind. And I think most of that is about the importance of those early years being impactful for lifelong. In other words, if we get some of that stuff right in those very, very early years, then actually we can really influence what happens to younger people and indeed adults throughout their life. In the yellow, we tried to connect that with, so I think we've got a bold ambition here, which is about every child in South Yorkshire being school ready. If you were to talk to any of our directors of public health, they'll tell you that that's actually quite varied across the whole of South Yorkshire. So that's why it's a bold commitment. That third block there is trying to help us, because we've got to find some way of helping ourselves think about, have we been successful in doing some good around our bold ambition? So that's trying to give a bit of shape. So we're really focusing in this strategy, aren't we, on health inequalities and trying to close some of that gap that exists across all of our places and indeed our population. So we've got the ambition around every child being school ready, but we've got a particular focus in ensuring that we're closing that gap. So that 25% that is highlighted there in terms of using the marker of children who are on school meals as opposed to those that are not, being able to see an improvement in school readiness, particularly in that population, as well as the overall commitment. That's really where we're trying to really make sure that we are able to see whether we're being successful. So I think all I'm reflecting here is actually this was one that was really, really well supported really early on and connects with both all of our strategies within each of our health and wellbeing boards. It connects with a priority in our combined mayoral authority. Oliver's got a huge commitment around this as well. And also connected really well with the insights that we got through from our engagement and the new insights from the What Matters to You campaign as well. I'm going to move on to Rupert, I think, for the next one, for our next bold ambition. Is that right, Rupert?
Yep, that's right. Morning, everyone. So this next slide, please. So this is the bold ambition around strengthening and accelerating our focus on prevention and early identification. And I think, we'd all have to say that, there's quite a lot already happening in this space. But if we're honest, it's probably not having the impact that we want it to have or need it to have, particularly in some of our poorest communities. And if you look at the data, and we've looked at the data, there are too many preventable deaths and too much misery from preventable conditions. And some of the quotes from people through some of the work that Andy talked about, they describe an understanding of the complexity of what impacts on their health. And as we've just mentioned, things like the cost of living crisis are going to make this more difficult for people. So it definitely feels that we need to change our mindset around prevention and early identification. And there's probably three things that we need to do. So I think we need to somehow move beyond thinking about individual risk factors. These are risk factors that cluster together and they accumulate across people's life, which is why it's really good to have the focus on early years. But actually, we need to keep that focus on as we go through people's working lives. The second sort of mind set shift we need to make is these aren't simple choices that people are making. These are complex biological, social, economic, environmental, commercial impacts that people are being impacted by. And we need to be much more sophisticated in how we approach those. And finally, the mind shift change we need to make is we need to see these as healthy building blocks of our health system of South Yorkshire. It's not just a health and care system, it's of the health system. And I think there are three things that we can do to sort of see that come to pass. So I think this requires a whole of society response. It's not just a responsibility for the NHS, it is a whole of society response. This is something we want to do working with and by, we're not doing to and for them. And this will need a sort of community, third sector, business, but also a health interaction change in the way that we approach this work. If you think back to maybe when some of us first sort of came into our roles, the Oneness report was about, and this was, you know, talked about sort of a fully engaged scenario. This doesn't happen overnight, and what it does need is a really ambitious challenge, I think, to galvanise us to act, which is why of all those sort of modifiable risk factors, the one that we selected was smoking, and to reduce smoking prevalence down to 5% by 2030. So that's where we are for this bold ambition. And now I think I'm going to Kathy.
Sorry, Kathy, before you go, can I just, I'm just slightly conscious of time and just want to give people the opportunity to sort of question and comment. So
next slide, please. I mean, we've talked a little bit about increasing economic participation anyway, and I think, you know, the quote speaks to that as well. You know, my health is dependent on my financial stability, and we're seeing that in the cost of living crisis. So really what we're aiming to do is reduce the economic inactivity rate in South Yorkshire to less than 20% through all of our collective inclusive economy work across all of the local authorities in South Yorkshire. And I suppose as part of that, we also want to look at how we can become a sustainable economy, and all of the work that we will be doing is through to accelerate the zero carbon work across South Yorkshire will also feed into that and feed into people living in warmer homes, you know, retrofitted homes, more energy efficient homes as well. So I'll pass on to the next person, whoever that is.
Thanks, Kathy. So this bold ambition, we can't do any of this without our workforce, and we talk about this, it's the heart of many of the challenges that we've got. And also largely our workforce is also our population. So they're not distinct. So if we can, as great employers, create inclusive workforces that look after the health and well-being of our people, they're also our population. So as Kathy explained, the bold ambition really though is to create a sense of an integrated workforce so that we can provide integrated health and care. So what we've tried to reflect there is the complexity of that. And we want to develop a workforce strategy that stretches beyond the normal professional, organisational, sector, place boundaries. So this, I don't think this is something that we've done before. So it is quite an interesting concept and an interesting challenge, which is why it's one of our bold ambitions. So we'll create a workforce strategy together so that our workforce feels valued and supported. And key to that is the parity of esteem, which is, again, a very complex area because it's not just across sector, it's actually within sectors, within professions and so on. So, but that's really important so that everybody feels that they belong, whether you're a volunteer, unpaid, whether you're in the voluntary sector, providing services, or any other element of our statutory organisations. In particular, though, we did have a bold ambition around our statutory partners, and we know we have to do more work to become more reflective of our communities. So that's why we have a specific target really for the statutory sector to do this. So we want to accelerate progress so that our workforce is more diverse at all levels. And then finally, we really want to make this bold statement to make sure that we contribute as employers for South Yorkshire becoming an anti-racist and inclusive health and care system through everything that we do, and do this with our communities. So it's not to, it's with. And we commit to taking real actions that will eradicate racism.
Oliver, so I've got some next steps, but we can leave those until after, so we can open it up to discussion and questions. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Give people the opportunity to comment and make questions and ask questions. Just before, I just want to abuse the chair's position just to firstly say thank you to everybody that's led this work, because I know it has been a huge rush, particularly Will leading on that work. So it has been a huge amount of work, I know, to get to a point where it can actually kind of be in this form. So thank you for everybody that's played their part. Secondly, could you please share with your networks, because an important part of this is that we get feedback on the strategy at this point. So please do. I will, if you could all please use your personal networks, your professional networks, to share this engagement strategy so that we can still get more feedback and hopefully inform the direction of travel. Thirdly, there are a couple of things that jumped out at me, which I don't know if they should or they shouldn't. But firstly, the fact that a child born today is still going to face a life which is 1.5 years shorter than a child born elsewhere in the country, and that is simply not good enough. And I know that we would all share that feeling. It can't be right that kids born in South Yorkshire live shorter lives than kids elsewhere, or people elsewhere. So just very conscious of that being a defining characteristic of the information that we've been given. And then last but not least, and this is quite important for me personally, look, I'm the only person in South Yorkshire who has been elected on the footprint of South Yorkshire. So I am elected by the whole population of this region, as well as being chair of the ICP. And if nothing else, my job is many and varied, not least kind of trying to fix public transport, plant more trees, get us to net zero, you name it really, but and grow the economy. But none of that matters if the people who live here aren't living better lives. So I am conscious that the strategy that we're talking about today is at the heart of what I want to try and do as mayor, and I'm responsible for delivering. But I'm afraid the bad news for everybody around this table is I'm not in that alone. So I'm acutely conscious, and I'm afraid I am putting you all on notice that what we are signing up to here is a test that we are setting ourselves. We are setting ourselves a test that we will be judged on by the communities of South Yorkshire. And as a representative of those people and communities, I will be holding both myself and you accountable for the test that we have set ourselves. So I am saying now, in good time, at the beginning of this, when you still have the time and chance and opportunity to help shape it, if you don't think you are committing to goals that you can agree to here, then please speak now or forever hold your peace, because this is your opportunity to shape those goals. But once they are committed to, we are all in. Okay, we are all in, because we are committing to delivering on the goals, the objectives, the shared outcomes, the bold ambitions that we have laid out here. So I just wanted to put that on record so that people can be aware that that's exactly what we are doing here today and going forward, and particularly by January 6th. So I thought that was important to say. Right, the number of hands around the table, if only through proximity. I will start with Greg and then move around the table, if that's okay.
Thanks, Oliver. So, many thoughts. I'll email most of them, but I'll say a few of them now. One, what a difference a few meetings make. I've missed a few meetings. This has come on amazingly in a few meetings time. So, thank you to Will and the team who've done that. Personally, I'm relaxed on timing. I'd be pretty relaxed on the maybe a two-stage process, do the necessary for DHSC by the 6th of January, and then do the job as we want to do the job with a slightly more relaxed timing, but not be too relaxed. I'd also I think there's something to point about honesty about the deliverability of this. We all know where we are resource-wise. We should keep the ambitions, no doubt about that. Personally, I'd be relaxed on the measuring the impact point. What will happen to Mrs. Smith in 4 years' time, number 44? We can't do that. 3 thoughts on specifics. On the if I had to keep one, I'd go for the best start. It's by far the most important to me. And if I could only keep one, I'd focus on being really specific about targets on breastfeeding, obesity, dental caries, road traffic accidents. What's the state of the art and how do we get there for each of those things? And that requires a little bit more work, hence my relaxedness on timing. Framing was my second specific, and as various people have said, kind of framing this in a sort of an NHS and care context versus a health context. That really matters to me. You'll have heard me whine on about that incessantly a lot, but I think we haven't quite got that right yet. I think there's a bit more work to do there. And if I had to pick one thing on framing, I think we should do more on the impact of harmful product industries on our choices. We talk about lifestyle choices and supporting people to live healthy lifestyles and all that kind of stuff. We haven't said much in here about advertising, licensing, education. That our kids are being educated with alcohol industry funded education packages. Ask yourself if that's okay. So I think we should do a bit more on that one. Lots of people have said some things about prevention versus health creation. I'd go for broke for the latter. No one can quite understand what prevention means. Ditto health creation, to be fair. Last point from me, I think there's a bit more to do on the wellbeing economy point. I think could do with some fleshing it out a bit more. What would Beveridge 2 look like in South Yorkshire? What if we were really going for broke? Model what's happening in Wales, Scotland, New Zealand, and you can't go on a field trip around the wellbeing economy in South Yorkshire. And there's a lot of stuff that we can just lift and shift. So that would be the one I'd go for broke on.
Thank you. Angela, can I bring you in on screen, please?
Thank you. Thanks, Oliver. I just wanted to, and sorry for not being there in person this morning. For me, I just wanted to follow from what you said, Oliver, about us making a commitment as the 4 parts of this partnership in South Yorkshire. I just wonder, how do we ensure accountability if politically there might not be that commitment, in the future, because things change and our 4 constituent parts, especially politically, are quite different. The way the way we run the council. So how do we ensure that there is accountability? We have very, very strong links in Sheffield in partnership between, the various, the NHS, the voluntary sector, the council, and I'm very proud that we have that. But how do we ensure that we all buy in and we really do it, and it's not just words, on a strategy? And so that is, for me, is very important that we keep reminding each other that we are committed to this. And we, I know that we are in this room, but how do we ensure that this is something that is lasting, and whatever the political landscape is in the future, that we still committed to it and we can't make excuses for ourselves?
Well, let me just briefly come in on that, and then other elected representatives around the table or virtually can maybe come in as we go around. I would say that it is the responsibility of the elected representatives around this table and officers who are representing local authorities to then feed that into their structures and mechanisms, so that there is a process within local authorities for that to then be part of an accountability structure, either in full council or in committees, to allow that to happen. I'm really happy as mayor with the combined authority alongside me to play that role and kind of make sure that it's on our agenda, both figuratively and literally. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way. But Angela, other elected representatives, if we have suggestions for how else that could be done, please do feel free to feed them in.
David Roach from Rotherham. Angela, I don't have the same worries as you, in the sense that a number of different political parties are represented in our health and wellbeing boards, and there's never been in ours, I can't speak to the others, any political arguments, but there's just been a commitment to work together to improve the health and welfare and social care of residents in Rotherham. And also, who knows who's going to win the next election? I know I'd like it to be, but I can't prejudge. However, I was in a call with Liz Kendall last week, focus call, and certainly If Labour were to win the next election, I have every confidence that what Liz Kendall was saying, that nationally they'd be committed to the things here too. So I was trying not to make that political, but just to say that locally, politicians of different parties are all engaged, and at national level too. I think there's that there too. If I can just make a couple of other points, that's okay. Andy, I remember I'd about to say months ago, certainly weeks ago, we were discussing the how do we engage with the wider community, and I think it was Greg's already said, we just sort of said it was impossible, we can't do it, we just do what we can, but you've done it. But I would ask you to make one change, which I find very discriminatory. You talk about talking to Christians, but then you said, we also heard from Catholics. A lot of Catholics find that discriminating to say that they're not Christians.
Well, if I did say that, I apologise.
It is. It's in. Well, no, it's in the text. Not.
Oh, right,
It's
okay.
not something you said. It's in the text.
We'll make that amendment.
And sort of final thing about the plan on page. Again, I think all credit to people who've been doing this. I think it's important that we don't focus down too much on one big thing. I suppose I've always been ambitious. I remember when we did our first health and wellbeing board plan in Rotherham, people said, oh, it's too long, too detailed, you'll never get through those things. We did, and we delivered it, and we keep on adjusting it. I hope Jason could back me out on that, and we're still working on where the future is. So I think it's, as you said, Greg, it's right to be ambitious, but the other reason I'm not so sure about where we focus down too much, totally agree, but best diet for children is very, very important. I think in terms of schools, some of the work that we've been doing teams around the school involvement, I think one of the other councils is doing that too. Is it Doncaster? Well, wherever it is, it's doing some excellent work in that area. So it will vary. In some of the four, it may be one thing which is where there is really need to focus, and another area. I'm not saying that we change any of that at all. All I'm saying is that I think we ought to keep in the shared outcomes them all there at a even level. The other one, which I have, so my final point, which I did, sorry, two more points. One is that I get very wary about planners and housing developers. I know we've included housing in our strategy, but certainly I'm aware of one big national developer who does all they can, or they do all they can to try to get out of the delivered share percentage of open space. They say they can't afford to deliver, I can't remember, it's roughly 15% of a development in Rotherham has to be open green space. They say, oh, they can't afford it, it's unsustainable, things like that. And they also often try to get the percentage of social housing to go down as well. Both those two are very important to people's health. And also, this has now changed in our area, may have changed in yours too. For the first time, we've now got commitment that no takeaways, fast food outlets within 100 metres of any school. Again, we need to make sure planners enforce that. So we do need to talk to planners and get that in the strategy. So the final thing is, in the joint commitments, 6 words were added after the last meeting by one person, I believe. And it does concern me a bit in that if we talk about discrimination, apart from racial discrimination, which is obviously appalling, we're all against it, there's also cultural discrimination. So my parents, both from Irish heritage, were severely discriminated on when they came from Ireland to England. Admittedly, that doesn't happen so much now, but we also have currently discrimination against the Romani, against travellers, against gypsies, of a very serious level. Angela might even say against occasion against the Welsh population too over here, but I won't press her on that. Also, people with learning disabilities. You mentioned that, Kathy, in your description. People with learning disabilities, people with gender discrimination we have in this country, age discrimination, people with physical discrimination. They are all groups that discriminated on against. I really feel that last one should go back to what it was before, with a full stop after the word discrimination, because we need to focus on all those discriminations if we're going to tackle health inequalities in Rotherham, or if it really felt I need to keep in that particular point to put including and then give a number of examples, such as because I say we can't ignore some of those key ones. I mean, talking to some of the people with learning disabilities, some of the people with care needs, the discrimination against them, and sometimes their access to health services is appalling. And again, Kate, if she wants to, can talk from her role about sometimes how unpaid carers are discriminated against. So we need to make sure all those groups are looked after, and we focus on ensuring there's as little discrimination, no discrimination against any of those groups.
Right, thank you. Can I just build on Councillor Roach's comments about the classification of religion? And I say this publicly rather than privately because I think it's important that people hear, as a Jewish person, could we please take some advice on Judaism being an ethnicity rather than a religion, purely a religion? As a Jewish person, my race is Judaism, and in the ethnicity section it's never covered, and is a frustration to me, and I know many other Jewish people. So could we just take some advice on that? Thank you. And can I just ask people who do want to come in to kind of just indicate now, because I'm conscious of time, so got just a couple. No, is that it? Okay, in which case, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sheena McDonald, Barnsley Hospital. I think the ambitions are really helpful, and I think, we're not going to argue with that in terms of our ambition. I think the key here for me, I think, is actually around the joint forward plan and the things that we're going to corral around it for the next couple of years. So I think, great that we've got the strategy done in a really short space of time, because that was an epic challenge. I think we've still got a lot of work to do to clarify what those 2-year ambitions, actual deliverables are going to be. And certainly I know I've shared this with colleagues in across health, and our acute federation, for example, are going to respond to the strategy. I think it'd be great to sort of share some of the videos we've seen today, so the animation around the engagement, because I think that's a great piece of work. I think it'd be good to just show those things, because although the ambitions, again, completely agree with all of them, and I don't think anybody would have any objection to them, the key messages that we heard from the population was around access and information, and then agency, and those are the things we need to focus on over the next couple of years, really. And so I think all of the things that we want to think about now around how we're going to get together in terms of our shared ambition around delivering some of those things, really, for the population of South Yorkshire. Thanks.
So this is a really good discussion, isn't it? So 4 quick points from me, really. First of all, I think just echoing a thank you, really, because in the way that Greg's described, seeing how this plan has developed in such short time, really, and how it's drawn together the various strands of work has been a testament just to us, this group, but also I think particularly Will and the team, Kathy, Mariana, Katie, and the rest of it. If you start listing names, then you get in trouble, don't you? Because you miss people out. But nevertheless, actually, it has been an enormously brilliant piece of work to bring this together. So it's a big thank you, really. So for me, I'm not going to get too fixated on some of the words. I absolutely pick up the points about actually getting the wording right. But actually, I think the plan is a good plan. In terms of where we are, actually, we can improve it, absolutely can. But what I absolutely love about it is it starts to codify our ambition effectively, I think, and actually in the way that it's been constructed has brought people together who maybe haven't been brought together previously, in a way that actually has allowed us to sort of strap ourselves to some of this work. And the key thing about the accountability point, and I think that's absolutely right, but the accountability doesn't just stretch in terms of political accountability. There is something about mutual accountability across this system, and I think actually this group and this plan actually allows that to take place. So I am heartened in terms of how that's been codified. Second point is about constancy of purpose and the stuff that Rupert picked up. I remember when Simon Stevens came in as the NHS, and he came in a blazer glory and produced a great document, and it was like a one-less lament, wasn't it? About what we should have done, and we wish we'd done it, and we haven't done it, and look where we are now. I think this plan needs to have constancy of purpose against the work that we've said we're going to do, because the worst thing is in about 2-3 years' time having another reflection about this. Clearly we need to tack, but the important thing is to hold true to what we've said we're going to do in terms of joint ambition, and if we don't do that, then actually, well, then we'll fall into the trap we've fallen into previously. And we're not short strategies, are we, truthfully, if I'm honest. Third point, what I really like about this plan is its holistic approach. So it's got bold ambition, but it really gets into the ribs of how we've got to change the system in terms of those joint commitments and into that enabling infrastructure that Mariana talked about. And then we've got to unpack that significantly, because that's where the sort of some of the big changes take place. And then fourth point for me, and I think it's been alluded to, I think Sheena, you just alluded to, we've got to bring this to life now for ourselves, really, and we've got to deepen that delivery, and we have to talk that through. We've got to engage with our workforce, we have to engage with our organisations and our communities, because it has to be something, doesn't it? It has to be something that we can that people sort of attach them to. So this is as much about a movement as it is about a plan, in my opinion, and that's what we've got to treat it as from here on in.
Very briefly, just building on Stephen's point on sort of constancy of purpose, there's something about highlighting the many good things that go on day in, day out across South Yorkshire. There's a whole load of stuff, and good begets more good. So we identify, we find the good, and we write positively about the good, and other people, oh right, yeah, we can do that, and we probably don't do enough of that.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, just briefly, just four quick things. I think the first thing is to say, I mean, it's terrific that we've gotten to this position so rapidly, but this is just a staging post. I think this will continue to develop as our partnership develops and our, I guess, our understanding of the communities we serve deepens. So I think it's a staging post. I think the work that's been done is tremendously important. You know, if you look at some of the challenges we're facing as an integrated care system at the moment, they are, you know, it's easy to use the word unprecedented, but it does feel unprecedented. And I think having a clear sense of our longer term direction, I think is critical to prevent us just being consumed by the immediate. So I think this is a really important piece of work. I think just listening to sort of Oliver's challenge, and I think some of the things that Shona was saying, you know, in terms of next steps, actually transacting this strategy in the operational plans that we develop over the next few months, I think will be critical. So I think that's a really critical next step. And then I think the final thing I just wanted to say was just the spirit within which the work has been done has been phenomenal. I mean, you know, this is a new partnership in essence. I mean, we've convened ourselves in a different way than we have before. And I think the work has been done in a tremendous spirit. So notwithstanding the challenges, and we have set ourselves some bold ambitions, but I think we've also laid some really terrific foundations in terms of the relationships we'll need in order to make this a reality. Thanks, Oliver.
Okay, well, I'm just closing comments and then.
Thank you. I think everything in my next steps has been said, hasn't it? But I just will try and pull it into some sort of shape. On the slide that you've seen before, I tried to just give a sense of what we're doing next. I think there's just a recognition that we just need to give folks a bit more time to be able to reflect on what we've got. You know, we are in a very sort of busy state, aren't we? So I think that's what I've tried to set out in terms of giving a bit of clarity on what comes next. I think there's something about our next meeting of an ICP. So our partnership will meet at the end of January, and I think that's the point at which we take stock of the rest of the feedback that we've had. And we reflect that at that meeting. And I think that then gives a bit of time to think about how we best launch this. And I think to be very open and fair, we've done this in a very, you know, in a very sort of short space of time, and at a time when we are hugely, you know, pulled into different directions. So I think not being totally committed at this stage, at which we'll cut off the point at which saying this is good to go. But I think if we just signpost the 24th of January to do that, that gives us a good few weeks over Christmas. But then the bit that I think Gavin's just said there in terms of how we start to transact and translate, as Sheena says, into our work that is already ongoing around the 5-year joint plan is something that's really quite critical as well. And the Integrated Care Board will obviously receive this strategy on the 4th of January. So there'll be an opportunity there for the Integrated Care Board to inform some initial thinking about that as well. So I think that's all I wanted to say, Oliver.
Thank you. Can I just check, because I just get these things printed out for me. Can I just check that has everyone got the link to the actual document itself that they can use to share online? Has everyone got that? Okay, great. Fab. Brilliant. I wasn't sure if it came as an attachment or yeah. Okay, great. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, in which case we'll move on to item number 6, please. Stephen, just so you know, I think the last bits of the agenda are all relatively light, so you've got 10 minutes ish. Okay, if you need.
10 minutes then. Mistake. All right. Well, I shall be brief. Okay. Right. Got my in. So I think a majority of people in this room are probably a little bit up to speed in terms of what we're doing around the Harvard Bloomberg work, but I am conscious that some people may not be. I think what this provides is a perfect follow-on from the discussion we've just had, and feeds very well, not just in terms of the strategy, but obviously the discussion. I think what we're saying is there's and Greg alluded to it. There's an enormously great richness of work going on across districts and across this conurbation. And actually what we found in some of these conversations is lots of very motivated, engaged and diverse group of organisations and partners involved in this work. And I am going to use that phrase, but good begets good, because actually that's where we are on some of this stuff. But actually what we've also said, and Gavin alluded to this point as well, that the strategy is a starting point, and we've worked very hard to look at the strategy in terms of a holistic approach and adding value. But we've also seen it very much as a staging post to other areas of work, how we can deepen collaboration, how we can change some of the system conditions by which actually produces some of the outcomes that we've currently found ourselves, and ultimately how we can start to turn the dial on some of those deep-seated issues. The Harvard Bloomberg Collaborative Programme is one such approach by which we can do that. Actually, there are lots of other things that we can do, but this is a significant opportunity for us to do this work. The backdrop to how we've found ourselves with the opportunity has come out of Oliver's work directly with Harvard Bloomberg, and how we as a Mayo region have been chosen, and it was a competitive process to actually work with other regions across the globe, in effect, working on trying to address complex problems through deepening collaborative approaches. There is a methodology that sits behind that, which I won't go into given the 10 minutes that I've got. But nevertheless, there's a methodology that sits behind it. But fundamentally, it is about how you can try and convene a system together to look at intractable problems and try and find ways of developing different solutions to it. So it's not about giving us solutions, it's about that developmental journey, which I think will be incredibly rich and enhancing in terms of the work. The essence of it is that we bring together a team of 40 people. It looks like it's probably going to be near 80 at the moment, but the system-wide group of people, and then we actually sort of get a group of 8 people to really do some very, very detailed work. That is the Harvard Bloomberg methodology. So like I said, we were chosen as one of the regions globally that's going to do that. Now, with Oliver as the chair of the ICP, and with the manifesto commitment that he made around turning the dial on health equity, and with some very clear ambitions about us ultimately being the healthiest region in the whole of the country, it seemed to us that actually that's where our starting point should be, and we should coincide the Harvard Bloomberg work with our ambitions around health equity. So that's what we've done. What we've also done at the same time is we've tried to sort of narrow that conversation down, partly because actually Harvard Bloomberg said that's too big an elephant to try and eat in one go, and you do need to refocus that down. A number of you in this room were involved in a kick-off discussion in November with some of our colleagues from Harvard Bloomberg, and we did a load of work around that, and that allowed us to have a really rich discussion about how we could narrow that down. And it's come as no surprise, given the conversation that's taking place in this room, that what we really want to concentrate in on in terms of focus is around that best start in life, around that first 1,000 days, around getting into school readiness, because actually, first of all, it's a priority within this plan that we've just approved. It's a priority within every plan that sits within every single district. Evidentially, it's the right thing, you know, that's what Marmot says, but actually, wherever you look, evidentially, we give kids the best start in life, first 1,000 days, get them ready for school, and we've got those ambitions. That actually is probably the most important thing that we could do in terms of the work that we've done. And also this has the support, not just of this group, but it also has support of the Harvard Bloomberg people. So that's actually seems to be the right thing to do. Just quickly, in terms of the next steps. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was comfortable with that focus. So that was one reason why I wanted to bring that conversation here, apart from giving you an update. And if we are, then actually, hopefully, in the space of a small number of a couple of weeks, we can finalise that team of 8 and actually sort of get that launched into the early new year. We will want to sort of enshrine the team of 40 as well, which includes every member of this group. So you're not off the hook in terms of that conversation, but it is a way of actually bringing some of this plan to life. And then, without going into too much detail, the team of 8 will start some very intensive programme of work throughout January and February, and we will spend a week-long session in New York mid-February with other city regions in terms of sharing ideas, and I'm sure that will be very intensive. Of the coming months, that work will then flow back into the team of 40, and hopefully out of that we will have something quite significant and impressive as a collective approach in terms of addressing early years and first 1,000 days and school readiness. And I say that from the perspective that actually we start from an incredibly strong base across South Yorkshire. There are examples in every single district about amazing work that's going on. So in some senses, it is about trying to draw strands of some of the work together, have some reflection around some of that work, bring in new thinking perhaps, and then come out with a series of collective ideas about how we could move this agenda forward at a scale that actually matches the ambition of this plan. I'll stop.
Perfectly timed. Thank you very much. That was an update rather than a comment piece, but are there any urgent questions anybody has for Stephen? No. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Steve. In which case, can we move on to Mark's agenda item, please?
Yeah, of course. Very briefly, Oliver, we've got 2 new members of the ICP who have been nominated from Sheffield, Julianne Hall from South Yorkshire Housing Association and Helen Steers from Voluntary Action Sheffield. So to welcome colleagues. And then just to note, we've got ongoing discussions with Sheffield Universities and the Police and Crime Commissioner around their membership of the ICP. And we'll bring further information on that to a future meeting.
Thank you, Mark. A model of brevity, which is nice. I think in particular that collaboration with the PCC's office, I think, is incredibly welcome. So thank you. Okay, we're on to item number 8, which is concluding comments and any other business, but I've spoken far too much already. So are there any other business items? No, nobody. In which case I should probably just say, look, thank you for all your work over the last few months, and I hope everybody has a very happy Christmas and a wonderful New Year. Our next meeting is on the 24th of January. We will see you all then, refreshed, energized, looking forward to a prosperous 2023. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Oliver.
Cheers.
Oliver, thank you.